Dr. Rana El-Kaliouby is an Egyptian-American scientist, entrepreneur, investor, and AI thought leader. She is the deputy CEO at SmartEye and formerly co-founder and CEO at Affectiva, an MIT spinoff that builds artificial intelligence systems to identify people's emotions, cognitive states, activities, and interactions. SmartEye and Affectiva's technologies are used by a quarter of Fortune Global 500 companies to test how consumers engage with videos, TV, and ads. They are also embedded in next-generation vehicles, allowing car manufacturers to build technologies that can adapt to complex human states. Their clients include NASA, Boeing, BMW, 70% of the world's largest advertisers, and importantly, one of our rivals, Harvard. Dr. Kaliouby is also a best-selling author, a general partner at an early-stage AI-focused venture fund, an executive fellow at the Harvard Business School, and a TED speaker and co-host of a PBS Nova series on AI, which is awesome because I loved seeing Nova as a kid. Dr. El-Kaliouby has been recognized on Entrepreneur's 100 Women of Influence, Fortune's 40 Under 40, Forbes' Top 50 Women in Tech, and Newsweek's Top Disruptors. She holds a PhD from the University of Cambridge and conducted postdoctoral work at the MIT Media Lab. Please join me in welcoming Dr. El-Kaliouby.
All right, good morning, everybody. Such a pleasure to be here today. I've been on this mission to humanize technology before it dehumanizes us for the last 20 plus years. And my approach to doing that is bringing emotional intelligence into our machines. And I'm actually super excited to follow Mar's talk because I think there's a lot of intersection between how do you bring emotion to these virtual and mixed reality experiences. So AI is deeply ingrained in every aspect of our lives. It's already taking on roles that were traditionally done by humans, acting on our behalf. Everything from, how many people here have used ChatGPT or GPT? Yeah, everybody. That's great. I sometimes end up in audiences where they're like, oh, I'm not quite sure what that is. I'm like, really? So yeah, it's taking on roles that were traditionally done by humans, everything from being your health companion to maybe being your learning companion, driving your car, hiring your next coworker. Maybe it's writing, your college essays, who knows, right? So the problem is, though, a lot of these technologies and the way we focus on building these technologies is we're focused on the IQ, the cognitive intelligence of these technologies. And nobody's really thinking about empathy and emotional and social skills of these devices and these technologies. And that's a problem because when you think of human intelligence, sure, your IQ matters, but we all know from our personal experiences that our emotional intelligence, our EQ, matters just as much. In fact, leaders who are most persuasive and they can motivate behavior change are the ones who are most empathetic and they can tap into that emotional experience of their audiences or their teams or their partners, etc. And so that is really missing from technology today, and that's a problem. And I really believe that we are in dangerous territory right now. So a few years ago, it's not new, like this idea that AI could be used nefariously or there's bias in the technology and the algorithms. This is not really new. A few years ago, Microsoft released a bot, and it was learning from people's tweets, and it became very racist within 24 hours, and they had to pull it down. There's been a lot of scrutiny around facial recognition technologies because it's been trained on a very non-diverse data set of white, mostly men. And so when it's deployed and tested on people, for example, who look like me, it doesn't even see, it could potentially not even see my face. So that's an issue, and there's been a lot of scrutiny, and it's hopefully been fixed, or the fix is in progress. So this idea of bias in algorithm has been around for a while, but with generative AI, it's become really front and center. And so I'm sure you've seen some of these headlines where, for example, ChatGPT, when it was first released to the public, Kevin Roose, a New York Times journalist, tried it out, and it basically had this conversation with him where it convinced him that he's in a really terrible marriage and he should leave his wife and maybe spend more time with GPT. So that was interesting. And then on a more serious note, this was not ChatGPT specifically. It was another bot This guy was based in Belgium. He called his particular bot Eliza. And this is actually now in the public records, but basically he was asking the bot how to commit suicide. And the bot's first answer was that this is a really bad idea, you need to get help. But he changed the prompt ever so slightly. And unfortunately, it did then give him, of course, like, here are some options for you to consider. Overdose of drugs, hanging yourself, shooting yourself in the head. It was terrible. And the guy actually ended up committing suicide. And his wife took this, made this interaction public. And I think that's really sad. And it kind of points to this idea that we're releasing these technologies in the wild. And we're often now relying on them for medical advice or legal advice or mental health advice. And unfortunately, these bots or these systems haven't really been tested. And there's no guardrails around how we could use them. Here's another case. A lawyer represents a guy who sued an airline. So the lawyer goes to ChatGPT to write a 10-page brief, submits it to the judge. The judge is like, a lot of this is like nonsense. These cases don't even exist. And so this is an example of the AI hallucinating. So that did not go well. And this is an example actually from my son who's here. He just wrapped up 8th grade. So I guess he had a science project and he wanted to ask GPT for sources for his research project. And GPT came up with like 8 super awesome sounding sources. So this is an example: Garbage, Air Pollution and Health in New York City, in the Journal of Environmental Health Perspectives, volume 125, number 1, year 2017, exactly the page numbers, a summary of the abstract. And poor Adam started to look for the actual for the actual paper, and he couldn't find it. So he came to me and he was like, Mom, I just can't find this. So it was an amazing learning experience, because that was when we realized, of course, it's hallucinating just by definition of how it's been trained, right? And of course, the answer here was not to rely on, at the time this was 3.5, version 3.5, but to use either version 4 or Bing, for example, as a search engine. But we're seeing a lot of these examples pop up everywhere, and not everybody has the intuition of how these systems work. And so there's a lot of, we're trusting these things, even though we really shouldn't. So yeah, we do need a new social contract between humans and machines, between humans and AI, one that is, human-centered and is based on empathy and, of course, trust. So what does this social contract potentially look like? Well, companies like NVIDIA and Microsoft are calling AI a co-pilot or a cobot if it's a robot. Is it really a co-pilot though? Like, if you think of a co-pilot, you could kind of step out and go to the bathroom and the co-pilot takes over. Is this really the case with AI? I think it's kind of overselling what AI can do. Tesla's an example of that too. You have a Tesla co-pilot. It's not really a co-pilot. You still need to be paying attention when you're driving the car. Is it a smart intern? I kind of like that analogy. You're delegating a lot of the kind of simpler, maybe lower level tasks to the intern. But then I heard somebody say, but what if the intern becomes so ambitious they want your job? I was like, actually that may not be a bad idea. Let the AI take my job. And then how autonomous should the AI be? Can it act on your behalf without turning back to you for permission? How tied to human intention and will does it have to be? And this is kind of Elon Musk's very strong views on that, hence Neuralink. He really thinks that it should be extremely tied to human intention and will. And then finally, I think of AI as more like augmented intelligence. It's a tool that helps us be smarter and more productive and healthier and more connected. So it's not a competition between humans and machines. It's really an augmentation. But these are all questions that have not been, it's all happening as this technology unfolds. There is no clear social contract between how we interact and coexist with these technologies. So I thought I'd give a little bit about my background. I am originally from Egypt. I was born in Cairo, grew up around the Middle East. My parents were both in technology. They actually met at a programming class where my dad taught my mom COBOL programming, which is an obsolete programming language. So I grew up surrounded by a lot of technologies. I was a awesome Space Invaders video gamer. And we were there when the first Gulf War happened. We were in Kuwait at the time, had to move back to Egypt and the United Arab Emirates. But I became really interested in this intersection between humans and machines, that touch point, that interface. And I projected that it's going to evolve over time and actually become more like the way we humans interact with one another. I did my PhD at Cambridge University exploring this idea of artificial emotional intelligence. And right at the very end of my PhD, I serendipitously met this MIT professor who basically said, well, why don't you come work with me as a postdoc at MIT? And we, I'll actually skip on that. And we started, well, maybe I won't. This was the origin story. I won't skip that. The reason why I started doing this research is when I first got to Cambridge, it was my first experience being away from home. And I remember clearly, this is over 23 years ago now, I remember clearly sitting in front of my laptop being so homesick and feeling so lonely, but I couldn't communicate that emotion. The best I could do was like a little sad emoji face. And I felt like all of the richness of our emotional experiences were basically disappearing into cyberspace. And that was the impetus for diving into like, okay, how can I bring emotions into our experiences with technology, not just to impact human-computer interfaces, but ultimately human-to-human connection, because this is how a lot of our communications today are digitally mediated. And in fact, only about 10% of how we communicate is in the actual choice of words we use. Over 90% of our communication is nonverbal. And it's kind of split equally between our facial expressions, our vocal intonations, our hand and body gestures. And it's also why we're having this event in person. Sure, we could do it virtually, but you don't get the same energy in the room and kind of the reciprocity you get when you're actually in front of a human being. So how can we capture some of these nonverbal signals and make them part of our interfaces? The science, I particularly focus on facial expressions. If you know me well, you know why. I'm like super emotive. But the science of facial expressions has been around forever. Back in the day, Duchenne used to electrically stimulate facial muscles to study them. Thankfully, we don't do that anymore. And then Paul Ekman and his team in the 1970s published a way to map every facial muscle to a code. So when you smile, you can all try it. That's the zygomatics muscle. It's action unit 12. This is action unit 4. And it takes about 100 hours of training to become a certified face coder. And then when you actually want to code a video, say you're watching a video interview and you want to see all the expressions that people are doing, it takes about 5 minutes to code 1 minute of video. It's so laborious, expensive, slow. So instead, we just use machine learning. We've collected, at this point, billions of examples of like people emoting in the wild and with people's permission. Everything's consented. Yeah, this is important. And then we, at the moment, use deep learning to essentially find what's common between smiles and frowns and eyebrow raises, and it learns. When we first started, this whole network was able to detect only 3 expressions: smile, eyebrow raise, and eyebrow furrow. It now has a repertoire of over 40 different expressions and states. It can do drowsiness, distraction, confusion, sentimentality. It can detect behaviors. It can detect, I'll give some examples later, but the more data we feed it, the more sophisticated it becomes, and that's really powerful. We're now actually at a moment in time where we're evaluating if we should like migrate our entire tech stack to use generative AI. I'm not convinced the technology's there yet for computer vision and video in particular, but we're kind of keeping a close eye on it. So yeah, after my PhD, I joined MIT Media Lab. I met this MIT professor, and she invited me to join, and we focused on applying our technology to autism and helping autistic kids understand these nonverbal skills by building wearable camera devices. And I think that's where augmented reality can be really powerful in this case. And very quickly, we found out that there was a lot of commercial interest in our technology. So we decided to start Affectiva. We spun out of the Media Lab back in 2009. And I remember clearly, because we were always pitching to investors who, there were almost 0 women that we ever pitched to. And we were pitching an emotion company to these older, mostly white men. So we avoided the E word at all costs. And we like danced around. We were like, yeah, we measure affect. It's sentiment. It's like, valence and arousal. And they were like, what's that? And so it took a while to actually, embrace the fact that we are building emotional intelligence into machines and own that. And then 2 years ago, we merged with a company called SmartEye. They're a publicly traded Swedish company, and they focus, their core technology was eye tracking, and we decided to bring the two technologies together. Often when I have these conversations with people, they don't realize that this technology is being deployed. This is not research anymore. And so I wanted to show some examples where this technology is being used on a day-to-day basis. And one is kind of helping brands and content developers understand how people emotionally engage with their experiences. So yeah, the technology's being used by 90% of the world's largest advertisers and about 28% of the Fortune 500 companies. So I'll show you one example, but basically the way this works is we would send you a link to a survey and we would ask for your permission to turn the camera on, if you want to, while you're watching a video. And if you say yes, camera turns on, we don't care who you are. We don't need any identifying information. We just capture your emotional responses. Then we aggregate all of that data and we can see moment by moment, where did people laugh? Where did people look confused? Where were they engaged? And this data is very powerful because it correlates to actual consumer behavior like buying behavior or virality or word of mouth. Okay, let's do that.
Come prima, più di prima, t'amerò. Per la vita, la mia vita ti darò. Sembra un sogno rivederti, accarezzarti, le tue mani fra le mani stringere ancora. Il mio mondo, tutto il mondo, sei per me. A nessuno voglio bene come a te. Ogni giorno, ogni istante, dolcemente ti dirò come prima, più di prima, t'amerò.
Yeah, Mom got there first. All right, so you can see here, this is just the smile response of, about 150 or so people. You can see exactly where people smiled. It turns out, if you can coincide a positive emotional experience with the brand reveal or brand, the actual brand or the product in there, that correlates very highly with brand perception and brand memory. And so what was also really interesting about this is we asked people to watch it a second time, that's the dotted line, and they could remember what's going to happen. You could see that the smiles actually happen before the scene occurs. So that's a great, that's a great signal that this is being retained in memory. By the way, most of the ads we test, or most of the content we test, is just like a boring flat line. Like shampoo ads, no emotional journey whatsoever. And it doesn't obviously have to be ads. We test a lot of content like Netflix series. We test some educational content. I think that's interesting. And then the question there is, how do you build these into, again, AR, VR, XR experiences to measure the emotional response? And in that case, I think the face could be a little challenging because it's often occluded by these devices. But maybe physiological signals could be an avenue there as well. This is really fascinating. John Gottman has, he's a marriage counselor. He's been doing this, marriage counselor, relationship counselor. He's been doing this for many, many, many years. And he is able to, by just watching 3-minute video clips of conversations between a couple and watching their facial expressions, like he looks for the AU10, which is upper lip raiser, which is a signal of contempt. He's able to predict very accurately if people are going to get divorced. So now he's using this technology to automate a lot of that. And I think that's so fascinating. And it opens up a lot of avenues for maybe just in time, couples counseling or therapy. So I've been keeping a close eye on experiences and developments like this. Now, at some point in time in the last 10 years, we started to get a lot of interest from the automotive industry. And our initial reaction was like, really, like, what's going to be happening inside a car? Like, we don't really expect people to be emoting, especially if they're alone in the car. And so we decided to go back and collect a lot of data to kind of test this hypothesis. Are there going to be any emotional experiences or expressions when you're driving? And so I'm going to share a few examples of videos that we have permission to share. These are people, like we sent people out with cameras in their cars. We said, we'll record your daily commutes for a few months. We're going to pay you to do that. So they installed the camera in the car. They know it's there. We're not spying on them. So here we go. So this video goes on for a while, and he actually starts driving at some point. There's like 4 stages of drowsiness. This is extreme drowsiness, basically asleep. And we can track that very easily because we can do eyelid tracking, we can do head tracking, and you can also see we're able to track his daughter in the backseat as well. So this is very dangerous. This is another example. Again, she put the camera in the car. Exactly. I know. Yeah, so not only one phone, but 2. We can do object detection, so we can detect the phones. We can detect this kind of, eye gaze pattern and head pattern. And that's an example where we can do this just in time, and the car can intervene and basically say, you know what, like, I'm going to be a safer driver right now than you. I'm taking over control. So that's some of the work we're doing. We already have 1 million cars on the road with some of this technology. This is another example where we're now not just focused on the driver. The camera is actually moving to the rear view mirror, and it's tracking all of the occupants in the vehicle. We had to retrain everything, all our algorithms with people wearing masks, obviously. So we used a lot of generative AI for that because it was so expensive to collect all the data again. So we just used synthetic data. Every year, unfortunately, about 50 or so infants are forgotten in the car, and they die of a heat stroke. So easy to fix with computer vision. We can detect if there's a car seat in the car. We can sometimes detect if there's a kid in the car, and we can alert the parents. So I think there's just a lot of safety opportunities, but also opportunities to understand the sentiment in the vehicle. And then you take this, and there's a lot of applications beyond automotive as well, especially in healthcare. That's an area that I'm very passionate about. And it intersects with robotics too, so I'll share some examples of the work that's happening in this space. This is Adam, by the way, many years ago with Jibo, which is an MIT spin-out. It's a social robot. And it's kind of interesting because I remember basically we have a lot of these devices at home. And Adam was like, well, Alexa's like your, what do you say, assistant, but Jibo is your companion. And I thought that was very interesting. The way you craft the personalities of these devices create a slightly different connection in terms of how we connect and experience these technologies. This is a great company. It's called Videra Health. I serve on their board. They use facial and vocal biomarkers to understand mental health disease. So between doctor visits, you're able to check in, record, answer a few questions with video, and then they use natural language processing and then facial expression analysis and vocal intonations, and they're able to flag if a person is deviating from their baseline, and they get you just in time human help. They've actually saved a number of people's lives, like young people who basically said, if this thing had not checked in with me at this point in time, I wouldn't be here. There's a lot of, again, intersection of robotics and emotional and social intelligence in healthcare. Mabu is another MIT spin-out. They are focused on terminally ill patients, so they send these robots because you can't send health support to every patient. So the robot is there as a health companion, and again, it can bring in an actual nurse or a doctor if they feel that something is off. Moxie is another one. It's focused on helping kids develop social and emotional abilities, especially kids on the autism spectrum. And what I love about this is the robot doesn't tire. It's very patient. You can do the same exercises over and over again. So that's another example. Yeah, and this one's kind of interesting. So this is a study that's a number of years old now, where they had PTSD patients, half of them interacted with an actual human therapist and half saw Sensei, this virtual emotionally intelligent avatar. And they found that the PTSD patients were more forthcoming with the avatar than they did with the therapist. And the reason is the avatar was more patient, it was available 24/7, and it was less judgmental. And I thought that was really interesting. And again, in this world of generative AI, where you can't always tell what's human and what's not, and what's, the line's blurring a little bit. What does that mean when we do mental health support and coaching and just medical advice in general? Do we need these things to disclose that they are AIs versus humans? And also, what does it mean about us humans when, there's a slight preference to use these AI systems? So a lot of questions in my mind around what does it mean to be human with all these advances. I often get a lot of questions about whether this technology should exist or not. And I know that there are nefarious use cases. You can use this to discriminate against people, to manipulate people. Our emotions are at the center of how we make a lot of our decisions. But it has so much potential for positive impact in the world. And this is one example. So I'll just play the video.
What do you see on screen?
Mom.
8-year-old Matthew Krieger has been diagnosed with autism.
A lot of the trouble he gets into with other kids is he thinks he's funny and doesn't read at all that he's not, or that they're annoyed or angry.
Matthew's mother, Laura, signed him up for a clinical trial being conducted by Ned Sahin.
I want to know what's going on inside the brain of someone with autism. And it turns out parents want to know that too. You get points for looking for a while, and then even for looking away and then looking back.
Sahin's company BrainPower uses Affectiva's software in programs Matthew sees through Google Glass. These games are trying to help him understand how facial expressions correspond to emotions and learn social cues.
One of the key life skills is understanding the emotions of others, and another is looking in their direction when they're speaking. Looking at your mom, and while it's green, you're getting points. When it starts to get orange and red, you'll slow down with the points.
Am I looking at you?
You are looking at him.
Just a few minutes later, the difference in Matthew's gaze overwhelmed his mother.
I'm going to cry.
Why?
When you look at me, it makes me think we haven't really before, because you're looking at me differently.
So BrainPower is now in about 450 homes. They're doing a clinical trial. We're already seeing a lot of improvement when the kids are wearing these devices. The question is this like a training tool? So if we take the device away, they're still retaining this learning, or is it more of a prosthetic device? And so that's the question they're trying to answer. But it's really amazing work. So yes, a lot of ethical challenges for human-centered AI. I worry most about bias and privacy concerns. But for me, I think we have a big issue here, which is there's just very little diversity in AI today. And I'm on this mission to change the face of AI. I do a lot of investing, and I'm really on a quest to find diverse AI founders and entrepreneurs. We need more women. We need more diverse looking people, but also people with diverse ideas and backgrounds. That's important too. And so that's become something I'm very passionate about. If you have connections to, if you know any like diverse founders or entrepreneurs, send them my way, please. And then just to end, this quote by Yuval Harari like really makes me think. For as the pace of change increases, not just the economy, but the very meaning of being human is likely to mutate. Yeah, for me, even though I've been in the AI space forever, it's not really about AI, it's just about us humans and how we connect with one another. Thank you.
Any questions? Oh, I see one over there.
Yes, today? Okay, I didn't see the news today, but, I do know that I've been following it closely. So the European Union has proposed the AI Act, which is a framework for AI, for ethical AI, basically, ethical development and deployment of AI. And there's a whole provision around the use of emotion recognition technology, especially around biometrics and surveillance. That's a lot of where the pushback is, which I love because we've actually completely steered away from that. In 2011, 2 years into our company, we were raising money. We were actually about to run out of money, actually. We were not going to make payroll in a couple of months. So we were out raising money, and we got this call from the venture arm of an intelligence agency, 3 letters, not to be named. And they said, we were raising at the time maybe 7 to 10 million. And they said, we'll give you $40 million on condition that you pivot the company to do basically lie detection and deception detection and surveillance. And we had to we had to pause for a second because it was very possible we weren't even going to exist in a couple of months. So this was a ton of money for us, but it was not at all in line with our core values of respecting people's privacy and consenting people. So we turned it away, and we were able to get funding elsewhere from top tier investors. So it all worked out. But not everybody makes that same kind of decision. And so I actually love that there's going to be thoughtful regulation around this. But it is a kind of an interesting time. Yeah.
So one, I love the autism piece. As a father with an autistic son, we couldn't hold a gaze until 18 years later. So really appreciate you sharing that. I'm curious if your research has led you to see any correlations between autonomous nervous states. I'm thinking polyvagal theory, especially people who have trauma histories, and how that may inform facial expression and so forth.
We're not doing as much work around this area right now, but we've done a lot of work where we measured like skin conductance, for example. We had a device that looks like this that measured galvanic skin response. This is now a separate company called Empatica, and they actually they do a lot of work in the epilepsy space. I don't know if they do a lot of trauma research, but I don't know. I don't know if it affects, I don't know if it like masks or dampens facial expressions. I don't know. That's a really fascinating question. Yeah, I'll look into that.
So there's this tension between like getting a lot of diverse voices in the room and then this pressure to start having rules and regulations. What are your thoughts about how you start to make rules and regulations before everybody's at the table and balance those two?
Yeah, I think in general, we can't wait because rules and regulations it's just a slower process, and the speed at which this technology is evolving, it's insane. I mean, I can't keep up anymore. It's just crazy. And so I don't think the solution is just going to be regulation and legislation. I actually feel strongly that we people in this room who are thought leaders, who get to choose what to build and how to deploy it and where to deploy it, the onus is on us to hold a higher bar, which is why I'm very vocal about the ethical use of emotion AI in particular, and I have conversations with our competitors. In fact, when we were selling the company, that was one of my main criteria. I wanted to make sure that wherever home we ended up, and whatever company we merged with, they had the same commitment to not using this technology in ways that could hurt people. But it's not easy. And also, I do think, I'm part of this think tank. We meet every Sunday. There's about 100 of it, 140 people, worldwide. They're all AI leaders. So it's 5 pages of Zoom home screens or whatever. There is no diversity. It's really sad. It's really scary, actually. So I think I'm going to get kicked out of this think tank because every Sunday I'm like, we need more diverse people here. It's just, yeah. So I don't know what the solution is. It's a struggle. It's a struggle. The struggle is real, totally.
Why do you think, because AI is so integral, it's so integrated at this point, and it's going to continue to be moving forward, why do you think there isn't a more diverse population of people actually promoting this, especially because a lot of resources are open source? So it's not like there won't be, there are not resources available. So what do you believe is the kind of, is there maybe a pushback against diversity in this space, or why would this?
I think it's not intentional, honestly. it's just a lot of the people I interface with, they're like, yeah, sure, we can be more diverse. I'm like, okay, but we're not doing anything about it. We're not even talking about it. So I think it's almost like a blind spot. That's the thing. A lot of the bias that's built into these systems, it's unintentional. It's because people come in with prior experiences and a certain perspective, and they're not. That's why like diverse teams make better products, because you bring all these different perspectives. So I just think we need more people to be more vocal about it and prioritize it and just be more intentional. The other thing too is the power of networks. Okay, I've seen that so many times now, especially that I'm an investor. The way this works is that you mostly invest in people you know, or you introduce them to other investors that you also know, because guess what? You started PayPal together, and then you did this company together, and then you invested in this billion-dollar company together. It's the same networks. And so to penetrate some of these networks so that you become an insider, it's so tough. So we just need, I don't know, we need newer networks. I actually don't know what the root solution is.
What this conference is for.
Yay, okay. We'll fix it here. All right, thank you so much.